Hi Team Value, JJ here. Welcome back. Well, it's time for my weekly investing update only for Patreon members, although I am going to release the first part of this one publicly as a bit of a preview for the new tier on Patreon, the Value Supporter tier. So this is a preview of what you get for that, and then I'll go more into the Value Angel tier, which won't be public, where I go into more candid thoughts on specific subjects. You can see them on the screen there, but in the supporter tier I'll go through the weekly investing videos that I've made and more thoughts, more candid thoughts. This is more casual kind of space than my usual videos. So let's get into that. All right, let's start with the summary. This week I've made 4 videos, public videos, and already made one for Patreon this week. But I started off with this one. Has Alibaba stock bottomed? Thoughts on crashed Alibaba. Alibaba here, and just in the last trading session, jumped 6.38%. I haven't checked, but that's one of the biggest jumps for quite a long time. And year to date, we can see that it's actually up now, 7.36%. So some positive signs there. It wasn't just Baba stock. It was a lot of the Chinese tech stocks. I haven't looked into the reason for that. I didn't see any major news there when I looked, but I will look into that, maybe do a video about it if there's something significant to report there. But definitely some positive signs. I'm wondering if the Chinese government is helping that somehow, in the background there, because I didn't see any immediate news, and there's a terrible macroeconomic conditions there. Maybe something's happened there for positive signs. I don't know. I'll have a look into that, but it's interesting because I made that video and then the stock jumped. Have we seen the bottom? The very bottom of the stock was actually a while ago. I said that in the video, but is this positive signs? It remains to be seen. We'll have to see. The fundamentals of Alibaba are pretty sound. They've got quite a lot of cash there. They're buying back shares. I mentioned these things before, so we'll see what happens there. The next video I made was about how to beat the stock market by doing almost nothing, and that was based on a Morningstar article where the guy back tested buying 500 stocks, basically the S&P 500 index. So this is similar to what's called the coffee can portfolio, where you just put stocks in there and you don't touch them for a very long time. It's been proven, people who have bought stocks and then just put them away and not touch them. We kind of obsess, a lot of people who are investors, we look at the market every day and we look at our portfolio and we do some hand wringing about it and should we change it. But it's been proven over time that if you just buy a set of stocks, and obviously good quality stocks to begin with, and then you just leave them for a very long time, you do pretty well beating the market. And he proved that he bought the S&P 500 stocks, didn't change them around like the S&P 500 index does. It changes around, stocks go in, stocks go out, like Tesla went in. Let's talk about Palantir going in soon and not touching those stocks for a very long time. The coffee can method has done well. The only thing about that is that in the portfolio, he did it in 10-year periods and over the 30-year period, and it did beat the S&P 500 index. And Warren Buffett often says to people, if they don't want to do stock analysis, if they don't have the ability or the time or want to do it, then buying the S&P 500 index does get a very good return. It has in the past historically over the long term. So it's really hard to beat. It's the benchmark for fund managers. So this coffee can approach is a good idea, but very hard to do, surprisingly hard to do, is just to buy some stocks and leave them alone. The only thing that I didn't like about it is that he said when companies got sold and you got some cash back, he didn't reinvest it, he just left it in cash for 10 years, which I think wouldn't be such a great idea when interest rates are so low. Maybe now when interest rates are higher, it's not such a bad idea. But, there's that temptation to reinvest with good companies along the way. I thought that was an interesting article about, that coffee can or just holding for a long-term investing. Now, if you're getting value out of this episode so far, I'd really appreciate it if you remember to hit that like button to help the algorithm to spread it to more people. Thanks. And then I made this video here about this historic catalyst in this sector. I'm not even going to name it because YouTube doesn't like me talking about it. This video didn't do very well, but I thought it was pretty interesting what happened with rescheduling the substance to Schedule 3. The DEA has approved it. It hasn't been official yet. There was a leak, but the DOJ has confirmed that it's going to happen. But what happened with the stocks after that is there was a 25% pop on average in the sector. and then it went down almost as much, but still up on the week. I'm going to talk about that later in the video, my thoughts on what's going to happen from here or what I think is going to happen. It's not predictable, but there was one catalyst that happened that people have been waiting for a long time, and I'll talk about that later in the video in that value angel tier. The next one was about the Starbucks stock crash after earnings. They had some pretty bad results, and there's a question about whether this is the macroeconomic situation or whether there's intense competition. They've definitely got intense competition in China, which I outlined in the video, and perhaps in the US as well. Excuse me, just pausing to have a sip of coffee made with my AeroPress coffee maker, which I highly recommend. I do own shares in the company with a controlling interest in AeroPress, which is Tiny Limited. I've made videos about Tiny before, but I wouldn't recommend anything that I don't truly love the product, and this makes fantastic coffee. I'm going to leave a link in the description to the Amazon store if you want to check that out. Don't take my word for it. There are so many great recommendations of the product. Just read through them, and it's not expensive for what it is. And the CEO had an interview with Jim Cramer from CNBC, and Jim was pretty angry. He seemed angry, and somebody said in the comments of that video that's because he was heavily invested in Starbucks, so he was pretty annoyed with the company. That's probably true because he's usually, a bit of a clown, really. He's quite entertaining, but that's part of his job. But he was pretty angry about it, so I reacted to that video. Now, I went through some of the numbers and talked about the earnings report. I'm not an investor in Starbucks, and I'm not planning to be, and I think there's trouble going on. It wouldn't surprise me if their CEO moved on soon and they had a rethink about what's going on, because there's definitely some trouble there. I don't think it's all macroeconomic, but maybe that's part of it. Is there the looming recession in the US? Certainly mixed signals, but maybe that could be the case. There are some signs with these latest earnings that some companies seem to be suffering a little bit, but is that the company's fault or is it the macroeconomic fault? Tesla was the big one. I made several videos about Tesla the week before. They're obviously having difficulties with their financials with higher rates, higher inflation, but Elon Musk in the earnings call, which I covered, talked about the future, and you got people excited, so the share price went up substantially after that, even though the earnings were pretty shocking, some of the numbers in there. So it's going to be interesting to see what they're like in the next quarter. But in any case, the stock went up. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Tesla over the coming months. He's promised quite a few things coming, and his timelines have been way off in the past, so we'll see what happens there. All right, that's a summary and some more of my thoughts on the topics that I've covered this week in those 4 videos, and that's for the value supporter tier on Patreon, and I'm going to release this publicly as a bit of a preview of that tier. And now we go into the value angel tier, where I go more in depth, more candid thoughts about other topics, which you can see on screen there. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. All right, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I'm going to put a link here to what YouTube thinks that you in particular should watch next. So go and see that now if you want to. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening, whatever platform you're doing that on, and I'll see you in the next one.